Hey, what's up guys? Gons here for the Face Like the Sun channel. I had a chance to speak with Patrick Wood of technocracy.news. He is the author of the book Trilaterals Over Washington, published back in 1978 alongside Anthony C. Sutton. And they nailed it way back then. They called out the technocracy well before anybody knew what was going on. Now it's just everyday headlines. The technocratic takeover is happening right before our eyes. But he does say that some of the stuff might be hype, and he talks about that in this conversation. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you guys get something out of it. He really does have some good insight into what's happening. And certainly Trilaterals Over Washington is a book you want to have as part of your research collection of books in paperback. And I decided to split this conversation into two parts because in the second half, he talks about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, which I hadn't really heard him talk about too much before this conversation here. So I wanted to highlight that area and then the rest of the conversation in a separate video. So look out for that. I should be posting it both at the same time. So make sure to check out the description section where everything is at. Like the video, share, subscribe, comment. Have an awesome day, guys. God bless. I have here with me Patrick Wood. He's the author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. He runs technocracy.news, and he's been up to date with all this stuff, you know, quantum computers, CRISPR gene editing, cryptocurrencies, brain-computer interfaces, Neuralink, mind uploading, total surveillance, total weather modification, total control. We're really living in this technocracy, aren't we, Mr. Patrick Wood?
We really are living in this time. It is this time of technocracy, and it is maturing as we watch all these things happen. Sometimes our website, Technocracy News, is misunderstood as being a basher of science and technology. Absolutely not true. I love science. I think it's wonderful. I think gadgets are wonderful. And when it serves me, when it benefits me as a human, as a person, I love it. But when people use the same technology to force me to serve them, I draw the red line and say, I'm not doing that. And I think a lot of other people are coming to that conclusion as well. It's just flat out wrong. It's using a legitimate thing like some scientific discovery or technology, whatever, to force men to serve them. And this is absolutely wrong. The other thing that people need to really understand is that technocracy is an economic system. It was designed specifically in the 1930s to replace capitalism and free enterprise. It didn't succeed back then, but it's made a comeback. This is why now we see the United Nations, for instance, swearing that they will overturn capitalism and free enterprise with sustainable development. And by the way, that term is an economic term, sustainable development. It's not a political term, it's an economic term.
Right.
So we see this happening around us. It's maturing. It's getting stronger. The net, if you will, is being spread around the world, and it's beginning to tighten now. I think people are feeling the pressure, and this is causing them to ask some questions. We want to be there to give them answers.
Right.
You see.
Yeah. And certainly I think you guys do a great job with that. And, it's really, you bring up an interesting point about technology and if it serves me. And I suppose I've seen it also as that ultimate end. If you take that to the extreme of what technology is planning to offer us, then it could be detrimental as well if it begins to infiltrate and change our genetic, makeup and things like that willingly. What are your thoughts there? Do you think there is a sort of adoption that's going to take place of some of these technologies that, are good, curing diseases, things like that seem to be in the works with the progress here?
Well, there's always some benevolent argument on any particular discovery. For instance, the use of this new CRISPR technology, CRISPR, gene editing technology. This was promised originally when it first came out. It was promised it's gonna solve AIDS. It's gonna do all kinds of things for for some genetic diseases and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, okay, there's the hype, right? There's all kinds of hype around it. Oh, it's going to be wonderful. You're going to see mankind is going to be revolutionized, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of people said at the time when it first was released, guys, this is nuts. This is not going to work. Oh, yes, it's going to work. They said, oh, we're sure of it. We're scientists. We got a handle on this. Well, okay, a group of scientists just today. Well, we don't know what today is, right? But it's almost the beginning of June.
Yeah.
A group at Columbia University did a study. Now, here's another group of scientists, right? They did a study on CRISPR technology, gene editing technology, and they determined quite scientifically and accurately that actually CRISPR produces hundreds of unintended mutations into the genome.
Right. Yeah.
Hundreds, not just one or two, but hundreds of unintended mutations. And it's like, okay, guys, let's sit back and take a deep breath. You've got one group that comes out with all this hype. We know now, looking backwards, it was just that. It was hype. And that's a point I want to make for a lot of this stuff. A lot of it's just pure hype. There's no substance to it whatsoever. Science fiction. These people have been listening to too many science fiction movies and been reading too many science fiction books. They come out with these fantastic discoveries and say, oh, it's going to be wonderful. You see, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. It's just so much hype. It's like, like this Wonder Woman movie coming out. Is there really a Wonder Woman in real life? No. Does anybody have those kind of magical powers that Wonder Woman? No. But, in the scientific world, people take that kind of thing. Oh, yes, it's real. Oh, yes, it's going to change the world. And then you find out later, no, it was just hype. It was all a big hot air balloon. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff we see today is just like that. And you got to look through this stuff and take it with a grain of salt, if you will, analyze a little bit more and say, well, are these people really serious? Or are they just a bunch of nutcakes?
Right.
That are dreaming this stuff up? And many of the times, that's all it is. Just these people are just dreaming stuff up, and they hang on to some little scientific, element or something to give it justification. But when you finally get down to look at it, it's just nuts. It will not work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, there's Neil Harbisson, the guy who is officially recognized as a cyborg already. There are things happening in that nature. And I just think it's fascinating how even just in terms of the business world and the entrepreneur world, you see this push towards efficiency and, things like Fitbits and, you can track your sleep, and that kind of stuff is really cool. I think that's really great. I track my sleeping and I'm like, wow, I need a lot more sleep, but as those things develop, at what point, does it become so objective that it really does objectify man more and more? We just become these data sets that we need improvement on or more efficiency on, and the human part or the man part becomes less and less, it seems. Do you think they're going to achieve some sort of, level of human quote unquote enhancement? Or do you think this is just going down a really bad path with things like CRISPR, which, by the way, I saw a news report saying that elementary school kids had an after school club, science club, where, these elementary school kids were literally messing around with the CRISPR-Cas9 kits and, doing gene mutations in little cultures and stuff. So, it's already happening with elementary school kids. How do you see it all unfolding?
Well, it's going to be bits and start. My guess is there will be probably some positive things come out of this.
Right.
Just because, that's, even a broken clock is right twice a day. So, we'll give them that. There's going to be some benefit. But putting that aside, there's the risk of catastrophic failure that is what really is disturbing people. And this is like, well, if you go back to World War II and invented the nuclear bomb, some scientists said, well, this would be a good idea to develop a nuclear bomb. Some other people said, why? What do we know? They asked the question, why would we want to do that? We have big bombs already, and et cetera, et cetera. And so the technocrat mind says, well, we invent because we can, we must.
Right.
And the other side says, well, did anybody ask why we want to do that? And they never met in the middle to have that discussion. So we got a nuclear bomb. Well, what's the only thing you can do with a nuclear bomb?
Blow it up.
Blow it up, detonate it. That's right. It's like, duh. Well, this is the same kind of mentality that we see, is a technocrat mentality that we see amongst the engineers, some engineers and some scientists today, is that they're compelled to invent merely because they can. And they feel that they have some kind of a vision that they must do this. And that's really wrong. That's not, we should do nothing in life without asking why.
Right.
And having some type of moral or ethical justification that our actions are beneficial to mankind or other people or whatever.
Right.
And they're not having those discussions on any of this stuff that nobody's having. It's amazing to me that the technocrat mind is completely devoid of moral compass. It's just not there. They avoid ethical discussions like the plague.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So they just do this stuff in a vacuum. Now, here's another point. Almost all of these people are on the public dole. You realize that. You go to a university. Where does the university get its money? It doesn't make anything, right? So it gets money from tuition, of course. It gets money maybe from donors, people at alumni or whatever that give big bucks to the school or something. But the vast majority of scientific research is funded by the government.
Yeah.
That's taxpayer money. So these people in scientific institutions within our universities and stuff that are studying all this stuff, they're funded by the taxpayer. Now, that's a free ride. If they didn't have that money behind them, what would be coming out of the scientific community? Well, nothing. Nothing. None of this stuff would exist were it not for the public dole. So these people attach themselves, kind of like the sucker fish, that attaches itself to different other fish, and it lives off of the host. And so they got this free ride, the best scientific labs that money can buy, and nobody will go in and question them and saying, why are you doing what you're doing?
Sorry.
That's what she said. That's exactly what she said. Yeah. She gets it.
She is not happy about this technocracy.
That's right.
Yeah, the man, you said so much there that I want to touch on. It seems like it's a spiritual problem, right? I think as a Christian looking at it, that's kind of what I see. It's the same sort of thing that has plagued man in terms of spiritual wickedness and all that. It seems to come from the same place. It seems to have the same sort of worldview or presupposition to their justification for pursuing this kind of stuff. Now, I have a question about the rise of Christian transhumanists and Mormon transhumanists melding sort of the spiritual side to this move towards human enhancement and all that. What's your take on some of these folks who are, in my opinion, sort of bending kind of the central stuff of the gospel and things like that too? Well, maybe not the gospel, but just not considering certain aspects of creation and the makeup and things like that. I just have a different perspective. But what do you think about some of these Christian transhumanists and Mormon transhumanists?
Well, the whole transhuman movement before science and technology really got ahead of steam. And when they wanted to get ahead of steam, let's go back to say 1970, just arbitrarily. Before 1970, transhumanism was purely a metaphysical exercise in philosophy and a religious belief, because it is religious. And there was no scientific facts to back it up or anything. It was just a bunch of people sitting around staring at their navels, and they said, we're going to become transhuman. And that's all it was. It was all in the mind. It was all, like a superset of human thinking.
Right.
Then, and they had no proof, they had no evidence that ever would happen. But when science started to advance, these very same people started to grab a hold of some of these scientific, quote unquote, breakthroughs. And they said, see, we told you so. We're going to get there. We're going to use this to achieve immortality, to achieve omniscience, etc. So today you have people like Zoltan Istvan, one of the leading transhumans in the world right now. He's running for governor of California, by the way.
Right, I know.
he's totally appropriate to follow Jerry Brown,
Yeah.
in my opinion. But Zoltan Istvan is he's what is it, talking up Elon Musk and Musk's scheme to create neural lace, Neural, neural lace that will create a neural link between the brain and computers.
Right.
And Musk is all steeped up on this. He's got people he's paying to do research and stuff on it. And by and large, let me tell you, this stuff is crackpot. There's the transhuman people have latched onto stuff like this, and they say, "Man, we got it this time. We're gonna do it." So the technology has caused them to be further deceived into their already crackpot scheme of achieving immortality. Now, we know that you have to be deceived to get to that point. The Bible says very clearly, it's appointed for man once to die, and then comes judgment, right? That's not going to change. They're not going to muscle God out of that kind of a premise.
Right.
That's set in stone. You don't have to believe it. You're still going to die. And look at Henry Kissinger, or not Henry, but Zbigniew Brzezinski just passed away. Right. David Rockefeller just passed away.
Well, I'm sure Kissinger's not too far behind, hopefully.
Kissinger's not too far behind. They had all these dreams. They're going to change the world. Well, they did. But you know what? They left this world with nothing.
Yeah.
None of their billions were left behind. Their clothes were left behind. Everything they had is left behind. And I guarantee if they're hobnobbing right now in Hades together, the last thing they're going to talk about are things like neural lace or the Trilateral Commission or the New International Economic Order. I'll tell you what, they have forgotten that whole thing. It's gone.
Yeah.
So you have this deception that takes place where people begin to believe a lie. And once you set down that path, you're basically open to believe anything that the devil or man might throw at you to believe. I mean, why not?
Right. Especially when science is behind it, right?
Well, science is a god that's being presented to many people as a god.
Yeah.
And the religious part of it is this: when you have a god set up like science, then you must have a priesthood, right? The priests are the ones who approach the God to hear from the God and bring the message back to the people, right? To the people in the pews.
Right.
This is exactly what we see happening with many scientists and engineers who have completely bought into this transhuman thing, to this technocracy thing. They go and, figuratively speaking, of course, they listen very carefully to what science is saying, and then they come back to us and they say, well, science says such and such. Science says this. Science says that. Science says that climate change is going to kill us all unless we mitigate carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And science all of a sudden becomes some type of an omniscient, cannot possibly be wrong God.
Right.
And the people just kind of dutifully follow along like any religion or any cult. They believe anything that the leader says, and they say, "Well, the guy does have a priesthood degree. I mean, crying out loud, he's got 2 PhDs, and he's a nuclear physicist.
Priesthood degree, PhD.
I know. Of course, he knows what science says, and we need to honor that.
Right.
We need to just listen to him and get wisdom.
Yeah.
But they're not getting any wisdom. That's my point. They're not getting any wisdom whatsoever. They're getting lies and deception."
Right. I'm just really fascinated with what kind of experiments are being done to try to progress in this sort of area, like neural lace and mind uploading and things like that. I mean, I would imagine that ultimately would require some sort of human sacrifice, ultimately to try to see if this thing even works. Which obviously you can see the deception therein. But the more practical side of things, the technology that we do know works in terms of what they're trying to build with sustainable development and all the talk about smart cities. What about that? Is that something that you think they're going to be able to achieve, or at least try to achieve in building stuff up? We talked about Canada, being one of the first. There's a city there that's going to create a smart city. RFID chips it's a real technology that's being developed. It gets kind of weird. These sorts of areas of our infrastructure that they're planning to rebuild with this kind of technology interfused with it. Is that more of an achievable thing for these guys?
Well, this is very physical, and it is very basic to society. That the idea of connections and connectivity and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Infrastructure right now is the singular greatest mantra of technocracy. Mm-hmm. I see this everywhere in the global media. I see global scholars writing books like, for instance, Dr. Parag Khanna, who's a scholar at the U School for Public Policy down in Singapore. He wrote a book called Connectography, Mapping the Future of Global Civilization. It's a thick book, very authoritative book. The global elite love this guy. He appears and speaks at all the big events, where the global elite are. And what he's saying in his book here is that we need to connect everything together. We need to connect all the cities together internally, and then we need to connect cities together to have a network of global cities. And that means roads, it means airplanes, it means rail, it means fiber optic, and everything else that goes along with that. But connecting everything together through infrastructure is the mantra that's being passed around the global elite today. The interesting thing about this is, when you go back and read Genesis 10 with the account of the Tower of Babel, mm-hmm. and how Babel was built up, and the people had one mind to do this, and they built this great city. And the builder of Babel, Nimrod, built other cities too. He's responsible for building Nineveh, for instance, which was a great city in the Old Testament. Well, what's happening today with this smart city, build the city and get everything under one control. When you consider the network of cities that these people are trying to build, in other words, connecting all the cities together mm-hmm. in the world to make one global city. Do you get my drift here?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Make one global city out of all these individual great smart cities. You just got to think back to Babel and say, you know what? There's some similarities here.
Yeah.
There's a Nimrod running around the planet here. and he's doing the same thing that he did back then, but now it's a little different. It's global, for one, and he's using technology to do it.
Right.
It's the carrot of technology is what's making this whole mantra possible.
Yeah, that's really interesting. If our friend, my friend anyway, I don't know if you know him, but Peter Goodgame had a say in this conversation. He would say that Nimrod maybe already did resurrect and is running around, literally. Yeah. But yeah, man, that whole thing, it just seems like there's so many things that can go wrong with that whole process, not just in building cities like that where people are basically enslaved. And I think there's something to Revelation, I think it was 18, I don't have it in front of me, 17 or 18, where it talks about, the merchants traded even human souls, right? And I feel like this sort of smart city type of thing it plays into that, where people are really locked in, they're, connected into the network, and that's their life now, and it's almost like you're giving up a part of yourself to be a part of the greater community. And it's really Borgish,
It is. And the lie that exists in it is already evident to me as I look at it. For instance, psychological studies by psychiatrists have been done on people who live in cities that have demonstrated the level of loneliness in cities is at record levels. And people feel isolated, even though they're surrounded by people everywhere they go, right? And people walking along, staring at their phones as they bump into, light poles and stuff. But they're right in the middle of the city. They've got all kinds of people they know, maybe physically, but the level of loneliness is skyrocketing. Now, if you multiply that by a couple of orders of magnitude, where smart cities is going, where everybody will be completely surveilled and micromanaged, as to what they can do and where they can go and what they can see. It's going to be like Brave New World, literally, from Huxley's book from 1932. Mm-hmm. When you see the end result of this, are people going to be happier as they promise, or are they going towards a soulical vacuum,
right?
Where their souls are going to be destroyed, if you will, from a practical point of view.
Right.
They won't be destroyed spiritually until they die, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's going to be the lie is going to become more evident as people realize how completely empty their lives are.
Mm-hmm.
This is tragic. In my mind, this is absolutely tragic, because you're going to have a whole generation of people in these giant smart cities that are all connected together, under the auspices of utopia. You're going to have basically a bunch of mental and soulical zombies walking around, pretending they're alive, which they are physically. They're going to be pretending they're alive, and they may even learn how to smile when appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
But inside, they're going to be absolutely empty.
Mm.
And, of course, this brings a Christian to think about the emptiness that exists in every person's soul when they're born.
Right.
Because God put a capacity into every person to relate to him.
Right.
And when you refuse to relate to him, you have nothing but vacuous spaces of emptiness.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And, there's a Barnagoop study that did, surveys on Christians. And it was interesting how they parsed out how Christians living in cities were much more likely to lean towards socialist or Marxist belief systems. Which is fascinating, to consider that, Christians, are even affected by their environment in terms of city life, and that's what they kind of turn to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's, I think, even more evidence that this stuff really does affect us.